There's a lot of creative ways to cheat in sports that you have zero idea about. $10 million on the line, and even the biggest of names in sports entertainment will do anything to win, sometimes going way too far. But when you risk it all for a huge reward, you also run the risk of your entire career, which might not be worth it. It's unlucky if you get caught cheating, even if you're New York Yankees legend Alex Rodriguez, who got caught cheating just to get caught cheating, allegedly. Welcome back to Top 5 Central, where today we count down 10 players banned from sports. The American cyclist Lance Armstrong used to be known by nicknames like Les Boss and Big Tex. They were marks of respect to his many victories in the sport. The man had cycled under Motorola between 1992 and 96, winning the World Road Championship that had been held in Norway in 1993. He took his first win at the Tour de France in the same year. By the end of 1996, he had already established himself as a global cycling icon. But then, disaster struck. Lance was diagnosed with cancer in 1996 at the young age of 25. It had spread to his brain, his lungs, and his abdomen. It was so bad that his doctors claimed he had very little chance of survival. But Armstrong didn't stop fighting, and by February 1997, he was declared cancer-free. He immediately dove back into cycling and was as dominant as ever. But his dominance drew the attention of the US Anti-Doping Agency. The investigators interviewed 26 people, 11 of which were teammates, and collected over 1,000 pages of evidence accusing him of cheating. In 2012, it was finally concluded that yes, Armstrong had been doping during his career. He was banned from the sport for life due to his illegal use of performance-enhancing substances, and high-profile members of the cycling community disavowed him completely. He was once viewed as the best cyclist America had ever produced, but was quickly regarded as an embarrassment better left forgotten. Marion Jones was a world-class track and field athlete and former pro basketball player from the United States. In 1992, she was invited to participate in the Olympic trials, and her ability scored her a spot as an alternate in the 4x100 meters relay, a position she declined. The Olympics came around again in 1996, and Marion Jones once more earned herself a spot, which she then had to give up due to injuries. Marion Jones would finally manage to get into the Olympic squad properly in the year 2000, when the Olympics were held in Sydney, Australia. She finished the event with 3 gold medals and 2 bronze medals. All of these medals were later stripped when it turned out she had been using performance-enhancing substances. The International Olympic Committee took the medals from the track and field star after she admitted that she had been using this before the Sydney Games. It was a designer substance known as the Clear, and it would have helped her break records and get her medals with ease. This wasn't the first time Marion had been under investigation either. Her history with substance abuse may have in fact stretched all the way back to her high school career, though at this time she was defended by her attorney Johnny Cochran and it was never proven. The case with the Sydney Olympics, however, saw her banned from track and field for life. In the modern day, we look back on the 80s as a time of partying and a lot of crazy things happening, a completely different era. In fact, it was so common at the time that the NBA even set up an anti-substance abuse program to keep its basketball players on the straight and narrow. It was this very program that caught Ray Richardson. At the time, Richardson was quickly rising to be an icon in the world of basketball, with some even calling him the next Walt Frazier. But Richardson had a problem. He had a substance addiction. In December of 1983, he had been to 3 separate clinics in the space of 5 months and had been dropped by the Jets. But in 1984, the Jets brought him back, and it looked like he was about to be the star of one of the best comeback stories the NBA had ever seen. He signed a 4-year contract for $3 million, participated in anti-abuse videos, and passed every one of the weekly tests that his new contract had signed him up for. But at the tail end of 1985, Richardson relapsed into his bad habits. The NBA booted him out a few months later. Now, while he had been banned from the NBA, it wasn't the end of Richardson. He signed a contract to play in the Italian League in Europe and rebuilt his life. He moved all across Europe, made countless European fans, and continued to play basketball until the age of 46. But he never played in the NBA ever again. Sammy Sosa had been a professional right fielder who had played for the Texas Rangers and the Chicago Cubs. Across his almost 20-year-long career, he became a player with national fame and is one of only 9 players in the history of Major League Baseball to hit 600 career home runs. He was also banned from the sport for using a corked bat. For those of you who don't know, a corked bat is a baseball bat that has been filled with cork or any other lighter or less dense material to make the bat feel lighter. The lighter a bat is, the faster a batter is going to be able to swing, which may improve the hitter's timing. For a while, people thought that a corked bat could lead to a kind of trampoline effect, which causes a ball to travel further than usual, but researchers of physics have shown that this isn't the case. Either way, the modification of a bat that'll be used in official play with illegal substances is considered illegal by MLB rules, and that was exactly what Sammy Sosa had done. In 2003, Sammy Sosa was locked into a game against the Devil Rays. The second and third innings were stacked with runners, and Sosa had just hit a grounder to second base. The only issue? The bat had shattered. The crew chief of the game inspected the bat and quickly realized it had been corked. Sosa was ejected from the game, and the runners were sent back to second and third base. Sosa claimed that the incident was caused by a mistake. He had grabbed the bat he used for practice instead of the bat he uses for games. But Sosa's ban lasted for 7 entire games. Fredrik Lures is a name that many of you probably don't even know. That's because he was born in 1884 in New York City and worked professionally as a bricklayer. It doesn't sound like the backstory of an Olympian, but it gets even crazier and stranger than you might think. In 1904, it was announced that the Metropolitan Association of the Amateur Athletic Union was going to hold a special 7-mile race at Celtic Park. Those who finished at the top 8 spots would win a paid trip to compete in the marathon at the Olympic Games in St. Louis later that year. Fredrik Lures was entered into the race representing the Mohawk Athletic Club. This is where things get strange. Around halfway into the race, Lures stopped running, he was exhausted, and wasn't going to make it to the rest of the way to the finish line. That's when his manager showed up in his car and gave him a lift for the remaining 11 miles, stopping just out of sight of the Olympic Stadium. He just continued on foot from there, where he broke the finishing line tape and was hailed as the winner of the race. Now, Lures went along with the celebration at first, but quickly admitted that it was a joke after the spectators began to claim that he didn't run the whole race. The Amateur Athletic Union then banned him for life, claiming he wouldn't be able to compete in any future races. Now, the ban was removed shortly after, he apologized, and it was found it hadn't been his intention to defraud. But then, just a year later, Fredrik was suspended from races for a second time by the AAU. This time, it was for participating in an unsanctioned meet. The ban lasted for 2 years. Stanley Wilson is a former professional running back who played for the NFL Cincinnati Bengals between 1983 and 1988. His career started when he played high school football for Banning High School in Los Angeles, before eventually going pro when he was selected by the Bengals in the 9th round of the 1983 NFL Draft. Wilson was primarily used as a fullback throughout his 5-year football career, but that career was one haunted by a terrible habit. It is widely agreed that the most notable case of Stanley Wilson relapsing into substance abuse was on the eve of the Super Bowl in 1989. The Bengals were set to play against the San Francisco 49ers. That night, Wilson told his teammates that he needed to go and grab his playbook before their last meeting before the game. 20 minutes passed and Wilson still hadn't showed up, so Jim Anderson, his position coach, went to find him. Anderson found Stanley in the bathroom doing exactly what you'd expect. The Bengals were forced to leave him off the roster for the match. This relapse had been his 3rd offense, and that was enough for the NFL's substance abuse policy to have him banned from the league for the rest of his life. Arthur Ernest Schlichter, more well known as Art, is a former professional quarterback who played for the Colts, the Buffalo Bills, the Ottawa Rough Riders, the Detroit Drive, and the Cincinnati Rockers. However, he's much better known for his 4-decade-long compulsive gambling habit, which landed him in jail for theft. There was a time where Art was the poster child for the NFL draft busts. He was ranked as an NCAA leader in at least one offensive category every year from 1978 to 1981, and had finished 6th or higher in the Heisman voting as a sophomore, junior, and senior. But that was just his college career. Art's professional life fared much worse. He never won a single game in 6 career starts, and more importantly, he faced multiple suspensions from the NFL for excessive gambling. It was an addiction that was never defeated, and as such landed him in jail for crimes relating to his gambling. No one knew at the time, but Art was a compulsive gambler, and he was in deep with the worst crowd. Things got so bad that he had to notify the FBI and the NFL that he feared he would eventually be asked to fix games. Now, this is when he was first suspended. It turned out that he had already been betting on football matches, which is something you were not allowed to do if you were playing in them. Years after his suspension was lifted, Art was still in need of money to feed his gambling habit. He did something incredibly stupid. He promised game tickets to college and NFL matches, even the Super Bowl, at a very low price. He was paid thousands of dollars but never gave people their tickets. Instead, he just spent the money on gambling. Over his life, he stole money from whoever he could. He scammed family members, friends, and strangers to get money for his gambling habit. He was in prison from 1995 to 2006 due to his theft, and then in November 2014, he was thrown back in jail for 7 more years due to his ticket fraud. With 54 home runs, 3 major league teams, and a shining 12-year career under his belt, it's safe to say that Shoeless Joe Jackson was a pretty good player. So good, in fact, that he still holds the Indians and White Sox franchise records for triples in a season and career batting average. Such achievements probably should have landed Shoeless Joe in the MLB Hall of Fame, and they might have if not for his association with the Black Sox scandal. Shoeless Joe has been banned from Major League Baseball since 1921, a ban that persists to this day even though the man himself passed away almost 70 years ago. This was due to his alleged involvement with the Black Sox scandal, where 8 members of the Chicago White Sox were accused of intentionally throwing the 1919 World Series against the Cincinnati Reds for money from a gambling syndicate. Now technically, all 8 men were acquitted of this crime in a public trial back in 1921, but the judge still permanently banned all of the 8 accused men from professional baseball. That punishment was later decided to also include banishment from any post-career honors, like consideration for the Hall of Fame. There have been requests for reinstatements for Shoeless Joe numerous times over the years, but even now the ban continues to be enforced. Billy Kudo, known as the Wild Beaver on the field, was a pro ice hockey defenseman from Canada. He played 10 seasons in the National Hockey League with teams like the Montreal Canadiens, the Hamilton Tigers, and the Boston Bruins. Throughout his career, he had served as a team captain and helped to win championship cups, and he was also banned from the NHL. 1927's NHL season had been billed the greatest season in the history of hockey. At the time, the NHL was still pretty new, but business was booming, and hockey had never been more popular. But after the finale to the season had come to a close, everything came crumbling down for Billy Kudo. The Bruins had lost to the Senators, and according to reports from The Citizen, after the game, several Bruins players assaulted the referee. The beatdown resulted in the lifetime banishment for Billy Kudo, and for some, it was something that had been seen as inevitable. Billy was well known for his temper and hot-headedness. He often did things that he regretted afterward. He had fought in playoffs in the past and even hooked his stick around other players' necks and threw them to the ground. When interviewed, the ref said that he was unharmed and that he only wanted to report the affair to the league president. But 24 hours later, Kudo had already been banned in what is now the league's longest suspension. Benjamin Johnson is a Jamaican-born Canadian who once sprinted for his country in the Olympics. His career was largely successful, earning him bronze, silver, and even gold medals at the global level. But of all the races that Ben Johnson had ever run in, it was the Seoul Olympics that would stick in everyone's memories the most. It was at the Seoul Olympics in 1988 that Johnson became the first man to break the 9.8-second barrier in a 100-meter sprint. It was an incredible moment, one that should have gone down in history for all the right reasons, but just 2 days later, he tested positive for a banned steroid and had his gold medal taken away from him. During the race, 6 of the 8 athletes that had entered were accused of doping. It was called the dirtiest race in history because of that fact, but only Ben Johnson tested positive for the drug. He was banned from competing shortly after. Wait, before you go, check out this video to find 10 more athletes caught cheating. See you guys there.